Today, I am joined by a familiar face, and this is the first person I've actually re-interviewed on the podcast, Olivia Ward, who is a good friend of mine. She's an absolute beast in the property investing space, number one property coach in Australia, and we're going to be unpacking some juicy stuff here today. So, Liv, welcome back to Money Mastery with Marshy.
Thank you, Mr. Marshy. Can I just say, last time we had a ball together. I forgot what we talked about, but I just remember you were so much fun and we went into so much about my life. And I thought, you know what? Let's talk about some myths and stuff for the listeners about property investing.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do, Liv. And for the listeners as well, if you're listening to this and you haven't heard of Olivia just yet, go back and listen to episode number 15 of the podcast, because that's where we actually unpacked Liv's story. It was a juicy episode. It's actually the third most listened to episode out of all the ones so far. So if you do want to go deeper into Liv's story, make sure you go back and listen to episode number 15. But today, Liv, we're not going to be unpacking your story. We're going to be getting into property investing myths.
Hell yeah, I'm excited for it. Hang on. So I was on number 15 last time, and now you're up to number 60.
Up to number 60. So I think it got released December 2023, last one.
Wow. That's a lot of episodes you filmed.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, one a week, just consistent, one a week. So looking forward to our conversation today, though, Liv.
You're so consistent. Thank you. I'm excited to give some juicy stuff.
Oh, there'll be heaps of juicy stuff, but before we get into it, Liv, I mean, I've been off social media for nearly 90 days now, off Facebook, Instagram, and Messenger. I don't know what's going on in the social media world. So, Liv, tell me, what have I been missing? What's been happening in your world?
What's been happening in my world? Okay. Wow, social media, it's been interesting. I built a business of creating a lot of content for me personally, and now I'm just like taking a bit of a step back in 2024. It's been 2 years kind of creating a lot of organic content. Whereas now I am taking a little bit of a step back. I'm still on social media. I'm just not pumping it out as much as what I needed to, because what's really cool is I now get a lot of friend referrals, which is great. So I don't need to pump as much as what I used to. So that's really paying off all the work that I did in the first 2.5, sort of 3 years of my business, which has been really nice. But in the overall landscape, you know what, I'm not that much actively involved, so it's probably hard for me to answer that question in terms of like being on social media. I'm not really on it that much anymore. However,
why not, Liv? Why aren't you on it? Is that because I'm sure you've consciously chosen this? Why are you offered a bit more this year?
Okay, this is getting really personal. You ready? It's because you and I have talked a lot about this thing called human design, and it's because I've been extremely burnt out as a manifestor in the world, and me responding to constant social media is not what I'm here to do. Although I like producing and talking. So I love to talk and get on. I just don't like to respond to a lot. So I'm a little bit burnt out from it, if I'm being honest with you. That's the number one reason why. Number two is I'm looking for different ways and different avenues of making money now. And I'm going into another whole entire world, which I'm not going to go into depths of just yet, because maybe we can talk about that one offline. But that one's I'm keeping to myself for a little bit. So I'm working on some other projects in the back end. That's the other reason why, which is taking up a bit of my time. And I'm also got my wedding coming up as well, which is taking up a lot of my time as well. 10 years into my my relationship, I'm getting married to my fiance of 10 years, which is pretty cool. Yes. And I'm just really loving being more present and reaping the fruits of my loins of what I've put into my business over the last couple of years, and just really focusing on, I suppose, the more one-on-one customer service with my clients as well, as opposed to needing to produce content as much. But I do believe that the production of content and marketing and that sort of hustle that is required, I do believe that is required at the start of business. And now I can sort of sit back and relax just a little bit and have a bit of a break. That's my answer.
Okay. And what's been like the biggest learning from, stepping back a little bit off socials this year for you? What's been the growth area?
The growth is that I truly believe energetically that you can convert more clients and call in your ideal client without that much effort. The clients or the people that would come to me that would question my service or that would just question the overall property investing journey, or didn't trust property or anything like that, they have phased out, which means that I can do less, which is great. So the biggest mind shift change that's happened for me is that I've been able to call in more aligned Australians who absolutely know that property is the thing for them. Mm-hmm. They just need someone to hold their hand throughout the whole entire process, which makes it easier for me to serve them and impact them rather than me convincing why they need to invest for themselves. So I don't spend much time doing that anymore, whereas I used to. In the way that I used to market, it used to be a little bit different. That's a bit of a long-winded answer. Did I answer that?
No, that's good. That's good. And like, who is it, Liv? Like, who's the person that you just love working with these days? Who energizes you when you're working with them? Who are they?
That is somebody who's just like, fuck the system. I hate the matrix, and I don't want to work forever. And they just want to learn a whole bunch of tips and tricks and hacks. Or they really are obsessed with property, but they just have no idea how to do it. And they just want someone just to tell them, do this and do that. And this is the reason why. And these are all these ways that you could like skip the process and get around it. Because I'm here to like teach people of a new and easier way to get what you want out of life and get what you want out of property investing. So it's people that really trust in me in teaching them how to get around certain stuff when it comes to property investing, how to just build wealth with ease. So those people who are, potentially in the 9-to-5 workforce, they're fucking hustling, but they're like, I'm not getting ahead. Like they can see it and they can feel it. Their life isn't like they're working more, but they're just like, I'm not any richer. And they just know that property is the thing, but they just have no idea where to start. Those people are the ones who are, and people who don't have money problems. Like energetically, if you don't want to get wealthy, then you're going to have a lot of emotional money blocks on wanting to build wealth and having wealth come to you if you have those energetic blockers as well.
Yeah, 100%.
I tend to pick them up easily. Sorry?
No, there you go. That's brilliant. So it sounds like you're calling it. It sounds like you've shifted energetically to a higher level, and because you've shifted energetically, then the people that are coming into your world have also shifted energetically. They're on a higher playing field, and that's what happens when we grow and when we set boundaries and increase. When we raise our standards, which is what you've done this year. That's the world is reflecting that back to you with the higher quality people as well, which is cool.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Well, let's get into it, Liv, because today we're going to be busting 10 property investing myths, 10 of the most common ones that you come across.
Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of juice. There's going to be a lot of juice in this as well, Liv. So let's dive straight in with the first one, which is properties cost over $700,000 here in Australia. Talk to that.
So a lot of people think, property is expensive. It's $700,000 or $1 million to buy a property. That's not true. Probably where you're looking, or wherever your community is and who you're hanging out with. Yes, if you're in the middle of Sydney or if you're in the middle of Melbourne, you're probably thinking, all the houses around me are $800,000 or $1 million. We've actually got to do something different now for millennials. We've got to look outside of our neighborhood, outside of our awareness, and we've got to look to other areas. So nowadays, millennials are getting better at this, and I feel like it is true that millennials are now being more open to the idea of, my broker says I can't afford to buy or lend or borrow money, or I can't come up with the money to buy something that's, $800,000, $1 million. But there are now data, and thanks to technology, not only from a data perspective to identify other suburbs, but thanks to technology, we can also communicate via Zoom to meet all the people that we need on our ground to buy in other areas. So it's just so much easier to buy in other areas that we don't even need to go and look or touch or feel the property. And in fact, I tell most investors, actually, I wouldn't even go anywhere near looking at your property. For me, I personally buy property to make sure I can't go and drive by, because you get emotionally attached to it. And with investing, you don't want that. So yeah, we buy properties in 2024. We buy properties every day, still, at the end of 2024, between $400,000 and $500,000 purchase price inside the top 1% suburbs. So it's like half the amount of what the typical person thinks that properties are worth.
You said top 1% suburbs live. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Okay. Top 1% suburbs are, what is all the data pointing towards that identifies a suburb to be the best, like the top 1%? Now, my team have spent over $7 million on creating AI and technology to identify these suburbs. And so it's a lot. It's 147 points of data to be exact. And of all of that information, we then zoom in and say, right, where is the best suburb for this particular investor to grab the capital growth, which is the number one thing you need for property investing, so capital growth to begin with.
Okay, so the AI that your team has, it looks at all these different data points to work out the top 1% areas in Australia to buy property and invest in property. And because 147 is a lot of data points, what would be like the top 3 most important in your mind?
Okay. Number 1 is the supply versus the demand. So that means the amount of people forecasted to move into that area versus the amount of houses available. That's the biggest one. The second biggest one is, actually there's 2 I think that are kind of head to head. And here's the thing as well, just for context, I'm a coach who teaches investors to not know this shit in detail. Even I have a team of 22 PhD data scientists, so even I'm not an expert at the data. I have my team do it for me, right? So it's funny that you're asking me this question, because I don't spend a lot of time on this because I have an entire team to do this for me. That's a bit of context for you. So yeah, first one is supply versus demand. The next one is the ratio as to how many people, renters versus owner occupiers that live in that area. And then we also have projects of moving in there. Or probably the second one is the affordability. Actually, I should have said that one first. So supply versus demand, and then affordability. So affordability being where, as an average Australian, let's just say I'm a mum and dad, where can I afford to live? And that's going to be, I believe, one of the biggest drivers. In terms of the gap between number 2 and number 3, I think that the range of that will be more important, and the differentiation of that being a driver is going to be the biggest driver, and there'll be a big gap because people will just be forced to live in particular areas specifically just for affordability, not because they truly desire it. So there's affordability and lifestyle. So what are the things, the amenities in that area that's wanting me to move into that area, such as, hospitals, schools, public transport, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's some of the big major ones.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Liv. And I guess, because I feel a lot of people, they only look in their backyard when they want to buy a property. So they only know like their local town or city, and they think, everything is expensive. And what I've been seeing, Liv, a lot this year, particularly like the Gen Z generation, which is the one underneath the millennials. So I think like 27 and under. Like I see so many articles and stuff about people saying like, it's so hard to get in the property market these days. Everything is just too expensive. All the boomers had it way easier than us. It's just so hard to get our foot in the door. I see this all the time. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I personally believe it is harder financially. However, I actually believe it's easier overall because of the information and the technology that we have at our fingertips to get the information for free. Like if you literally just went to my YouTube channel, Olivia Ward Property, you just went there and you watched all of my videos back to back on my YouTube channel, you will be a lot smarter. You'll probably be in the top 1% of like knowledge in real estate. Mm-hmm. So whilst, yes, it is harder from a lending perspective. In fact, actually, even there's some lending aspects that I would say is actually easier, but overall, in terms of our income versus the value of real estate, yes, that is a lot more challenging, right? We need dual incomes these days just to survive. However, I personally believe, thanks to the internet and the information that can fast track us or get around those loopholes, I think is much easier. If we look at the boomers back in the day, they didn't have this information. They were kind of just winging it, or they just had to hope that they could find someone, manually go and find someone that could help them, which would be a lot more difficult. And there was there's no such thing as YouTube and podcasts back in the day. Now, I personally think there's no excuse.
Yes. Okay. I'm with you on that 100%. And I feel like the other point on this one as well is a lot of people are conditioned to think they just need to buy their own home. And I feel like that's why they stay out of the property market, because buying their own home in the backyard is like a massive capital outlay. But I feel like young people have been conditioned into thinking they just need to buy this home straight away to live in, which I know isn't necessarily what you teach and what you're about. What's your perspective?
Buying your own home is financially one of the silliest financial moves that most people could make. And that might trigger a lot of people because they could be like, well, hang on, I bought my home to live in and look, it's gone up $500,000. Great, but it doesn't produce income. So it just locks you in. And for the average person that comes to me that pulls out their equity, so for most Australians, in order to get ahead and get into the property investing, they typically pull out equity out of their first house and utilize that to buy the next one. Mm-hmm. Now, whenever I look at portfolio planners, my team do a portfolio planner, which is essentially the thing that just forecasts your wealth, right? But like down to the T, it's like this 30-year forecast. Everyone loves it. When we show people the impact of them not living in a home that they own versus buying themselves a PPR, a home to live in, the wealth impact to their portfolio, their overall wealth, is dramatic, like a huge difference. And the biggest reason is because when you live in a home that you own, it does not produce income. So because it doesn't produce income, the bank's like, well, hang on, you've got this $500,000 mortgage that you're the minion to go to your 9-to-5 job to pay it off, as opposed to me being a rent investor, which is where I rent where I live, means all that my debt produces income, and it's easier for me to continuously borrow money. And being able to borrow money is one of the 4 major pillars that you need in order that moves your portfolio quicker, that shows you how quick you're going to go. So you need to have the bank on your side. And the easiest way to have a bank on your side and to blow up your wealth, your overall wealth, easiest way is to not live in a home that you own.
Okay, so now, again, that's probably, I don't think that myth is actually on here, but it's almost adding it to the list, I would say, on this one.
It's interesting because I talk a lot about it, and it's one of the biggest hindrances. I would say it is the number one biggest hindrance to people, whatever that word is. It's the thing that slows the most people down overall. And also, I don't want it to be something where people assume, Olivia is saying that you have to be a rent investor in order to build wealth. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's a fast-tracking tool. That's it. So just because I utilize rent investing as a tool, so rent where I live, doesn't mean you have to. And then people come to me every single day with a home and a PPR, average, Australian household income, mum and dad going to work with a couple of kids that are earning under $200,000 as a household income. Like, I help those people every day build an empire. So you don't have to do the rent investing thing. It's just something that speeds you up. So I don't like to talk about it too much. And also I feel like I have spoken about it a lot. So that's why I chose not to talk too much about it on this one today.
And I guess it comes back to us all, just people's goals and what they value. Like, some people really value security and just owning their own home. That's their thing, and they don't really care. They're not so interested in building wealth and having freedom and choice. And I guess the people that want to work with you, Liv, they're the people who want freedom and choice and to accelerate their wealth. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. They just not. I'd say 70% of people. I ask people why, and most people's goals are number one. First thing people say to me is, I want to replace my income. I don't want to work. So 70% of people, that's first answer. Second answer is, I want to pay off my home debt, so my PPR quicker. Great. Investing is a great way to do that. And the third reason, which is probably only equals 5 to 10% of people, is they say they want to build generational wealth for their kids. But the biggest chunk is the 70% who say, I want to replace my income, produce passive cash flow to live off so they don't have to work.
Just say someone wants to get 100K passive income. They say they're only 100K, I want to replace my income. With like the plans and stuff that your team and that do, like, how long would it typically take for someone to build up 100K of passive income from a property portfolio with you and your team?
I'm just going to put in a lot of caveats here. It's a very dangerous question for me to answer.
Okay. Lots of disclaimers then. Add in the disclaimers.
Add in the disclaimers. So The disclaimer is none of this is financial advice. So I'm going to give you a really, 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 really rough average, right? So I'm going to give a couple of scenarios to this before I do. So let's just say you're a couple with a dual income earning around combined, let's just say 150 grand per year combined as both your incomes. And let's say you own a home already with a mortgage of roughly $300,000 to $500,000 mortgage. And your borrowing capacity is roughly somewhere between 800,000, actually I'm going to say less, somewhere between $700,000 to $900,000 of borrowing capacity. And the other thing that you tick as well is that you have a savings rate, or amount of money that you can put away, of about $25,000 per year in terms of savings, saving roughly $1,200 a month.
Okay.
An average person like that would get to about $100,000 of passive income somewhere between year 10 to year 15.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's not a very long time.
It's not a very long time. They don't need any money at all to begin with. So they can completely just use equity from their existing home to start off with. So zero cash of your own money to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then all you need to do is just have a consistent savings rate, about 20 to 25K per year. That average person today, including how high interest rates are and how expensive property is this day and age, yeah, average is about 100, probably about 10 years. For some people it might be 10, for some people it might be 15. But obviously the less debt you have and the more income you have, like that'll just fast track, either A, fast track it, or B, give you a lot more income. And just for context, I've looked over 250 property portfolios planners that my team have done that I've specifically looked at and reviewed. Yeah.
It's a lot. What about, Liv, just say if they didn't have a house yet, and so they need to get the first one, because I guess that's always the hardest. How much would that inflate the time span, do you think? I mean, there's lots of variables, obviously.
It's interesting because if you're actually coming to us with cash, you'll actually fast track it a bit more. So if you don't have a home and a PPR, and instead you've got, like, let's just say $100,000 of liquid cash to begin with, believe it or not, it'll be slightly quicker. And that's because you're coming up with cash, not equity, because equity that you're taking out from a home has debt. It's debt, so it's got mortgage repayments associated to it. So it'll be that little bit quicker. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So I had actually a mutual friend of ours come to me, and he had two investment properties, one in Sydney, one in Brisbane. He sold one in Sydney, which gave him I think it was either 200 or 250K cash from that sale. Held on to the Brisbane one. And in 15 years, he's going to get to $320,000 of passive income in 15 years.
$320,000 in 15 years. That's crazy. That's mind-boggling.
Big difference, right? Because he's coming to me with that cash lump sum to begin with. Yep. Where did he get that from? Originally property. But he didn't make money. It's so funny. Yeah. Sorry?
They're mind-boggling numbers. Like it's just so, yeah. It's not what people are programmed to believe. Like how fast you can potentially build wealth and build a passive income through property. Like that's super fast to what I always believed. So you're busting my myths here. 100% Liv.
Yes, that's the goal.
Okay.
Busting the myths.
Okay. I feel like we've covered like so many busts just in that. That was literally the first one. We've covered so many already, like extra ones.
All right, cool. Let's get the next one.
So keep moving on. So the next one is it's hard to buy interstate.
Yeah, I think we dabbled on that one a little bit too. So this day and age, for example, first of all, we have data to buy interstate. Second of all, we have real estate agents on the ground now that can look at property for you in order for you to buy that. There's so many different checkpoints. I'll go through them with you. So, for example, when we put in an offer on a property, we have a real estate agent separate from the sales rep. So usually you have the sales rep who gives you the glossy photos of like, yeah, this is how amazing it is. We get a separate real estate agent, and you can do this yourself if you want to buy real estate on your own. You can do this by simply approaching a real estate agent to say, hey, I'm about to buy this investment property. I'm going to need a property manager for this. So can you help me out by walking into that property for me? So a localized real estate agent, walk in there, take a video of it, like walk through video of it and present it to me and highlight to me all of the risks that you can see with your eye, things that are of a concern that we need to be mindful of in order to rent it. And if you do this walkthrough for me, I'll come back to you and you can manage my property for me. So they're like, hell yeah, that's like a future sale to them. So that's check number one. Check number two, there's actually 3 different forms of inspections that we do now. Well, actually, they've been around forever, but I'd say 95% of people don't do these. In fact, I didn't when I first started. So there's a building inspector to, number one, look at the physical building and the pest and do a pest check, so look for termites. So they're looking at the structural and termites. Most people just get that report done. Then we go to the next level. You can then also request for a separate electrical inspector and a separate plumbing inspector. What that will then do is that will then highlight, all 3 of those reports will highlight different problems. Now, a lot of people just get the building one and then they forget to do like a thorough check on the electrical stuff and the electrical wiring and the plumbing and stuff. There's a lot of things that could be missed out of that building one. So we're getting those extra layers of information and visibility of the property and looking for extra problems. Then what happens is you can then use those 3 reports to then go back to the seller and then get the seller to fix stuff as part of settlement. So then you say, hey, seller, there's $15,000 worth of problems. Got a couple of quotes. Can you please, fix $10,000 worth? Great. You've just now gotten yourself out of a $10,000 problem. So there's all of those different layers of checks. And then what you can do is at the end, that first property manager that walked in, that took the video, you can then get them to walk through the house again a week before settlement to say, hey, the seller had agreed to fix these $10,000 worth of stuff. Can you please now walk in and send me photos and proof that they did it? So it is much easier in my mind to buy properties this day and age thanks to technology, thanks to things like Zoom, meetings, even just the technology available to look at different reports, such as like how many public houses are in the area, what's the percentage of that. We're able to get more detailed flood maps these days. All of this information helps us prevent you buying a dud, essentially.
Yeah, because I feel like with this one, most people think they need to do all the work themselves, and I think that they wouldn't want to buy interstate because that means, I have to go fly interstate and know all this stuff and do all this stuff. I just don't have time to do that. But what you're saying is it's almost like the art of delegation and having experts do all that work, the nitty gritty work for you. Like, so having a team or delegating.
Or delegating it. Yep. And I say to my clients, like as a coach, I'm training my clients to be the CEO of this business. What is the core thing that the CEO needs to focus on? Number 1 is raising money, aka getting the bank to give you money. Number 2 is outsourcing, right? Hiring the team. In a business, it would be staff. In property, it's hiring your team, such as your accountants, your brokers, your buyer's agents, your property managers, like all of these people, hiring them to get the really good elite ones so that you can step back and not have to know 100% of everything about their role. Sorry, I forgot your original question that you said about that.
Well, just on that, Liv. So, like, just say if people work with you and your team straight away, like they don't need to go find their own team. It's like you've got the team, and that's, I guess, one of the advantages of working with someone like yourself. You've already got the team. You don't need to go find all the property inspectors and the buyers agents and everything. You've got the team, and that's the beauty.
No, we don't have to do anything with me. This is my team's what we call like an end-to-end service. So there's nothing that you need to do other than upload your documents to your broker and sign your mortgage documents when they get delivered a week before settlement. That's it. And maybe you set up a trust with your accountant if that needs to be done. Aside from that, that's it. That's as easy as it gets to be for people who come to me, because most people these days are sitting in the grind at their 9-to-5 jobs with a couple of kids and they have no additional time. So my team will do all of it end to end in order to get the property in the door without you having to do any of it. We'll just say, do this because we said so. But also, as a coach, I add that extra layer of teaching people the why behind everything and empowering them with the information. So a lot of times, sometimes my clients will come to me and they'll be like, Liv, what are these numbers and what are we looking for? And sometimes they're just asking me questions because a lot of people need to hear things 20 times because it's so confusing in real estate. And I push it back onto some of my clients and I say, great, these are the numbers, but I want you to tell me why we're doing these numbers. Why is it that we're choosing this LVR? Why is it that you've got this interest rate? Why is it that we're setting the purchase price this amount? So I will say to them, this is why we're going to set it like this first. So I'll build the strategy, but then I'll get you to repeat to me over time why. So that way you're learning at the same time. So I don't want you to be dependent on me.
That's it. And you want to empower people, and you want people to, you want to educate, but you want people to think for themselves as well. You don't want to outsource your thinking to other people. You want to be able to think for yourself. And that's one of the art of being a great coach. It's like, yes, having the knowledge and skill set, but also being able to ask the right questions of your clients to empower them to actually think.
Yes. So half of what I do is spending time on teaching my clients how to ask high quality questions. And sometimes I get to the end with some people and they're like, fuck, I learned so much. I'm like, what's the most important thing? They're like, you taught me to ask this. I'm like, good. So I'm not teaching you to be a minion and to know everything. I'm just teaching you how to ask the most important high quality questions of all of the experts that you're paying for them to know that information.
Mm-hmm. Is there a common question among a lot of them that comes up, or does it vary just depending on who you're talking to?
It's interesting. I think I am naturally drawing in people who want to know more about processes. They're like, what's next? Just tell me the next step and why. So it's funny because sometimes I'm just a forecaster and I'm just explaining, or like a process person and just be like mapping out the steps of like, you're going to go through this. And then when this person approaches you, accountant, broker, advisor, agent, whatever, when they ask you this, then you will respond with this. So I'm typically quite a process-driven person. I'm not typically a process-driven person, I'm attracting like a lot of that because it's confusing. Most people don't buy properties. You think about it, most people just buy one property and then that's it. So the transaction of the process, people are like, oh, what? And obviously you and I know, Marshy, through doing human design, our biggest percentage of the community is generators who are 30% of the population. And these 30% of the population just tell me the process, Olivia. Like, yeah, sure, no worries. But to ask you the question, the biggest confusing area in all of that would be the time when people get very confused when they're told to buy, whether or not they should buy this next property inside a trust or inside their personal name. And it can be a very stressful or confusing part of the journey. And I really simplify the hell out of it. And I educate people around why they're going to have conflicting information from different people. So usually brokers and accountants don't align on the topic, but you have to get their opinion from both of them. So it can be really confusing as to why accountant's telling you one thing, but the broker's telling you something else. So I sort of bridge that gap. Kind of call myself like a translator as such.
And it's important to have, because I guess like financial lingo can be very, very confusing, and then among different people in there as well. So for the layman person, for everyday people, it's like financial stuff is confusing. So having someone like yourself translate the alien language of these financial people into everyday speak that's a very valuable skill in and of itself, plus all the other stuff that you do.
I know. I think I'm so grateful that I was a year 10 high school dropout that was dyslexic that also couldn't read. Because what that meant is that I don't have a large vocabulary at all. And the one thing that annoyed me when I was younger was I was sick of the guys in the industry who would have a bit of a chip on their shoulders to make themselves look sophisticated, that they were really smart and intelligent. And I'm like, great, it just means you're using these big words and I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't know what that word means. You're just confusing me. So it was really great, and I love that I had extreme learning difficulties, was that it's made me a better teacher. It's made me be able to dumb it down for the average Australian, and I'm always very mindful of me using jargon words. Now, I'm mindful that as a coach, if you're going to come into my world and you want to be an active investor, you do need to learn them. So I need to teach you these acronyms and all the jargon words, but I'm very good at highlighting them and not using them and then explaining them as I use them. Because yes,
I think that's why you've been one of the reasons you've been so successful, Liv, not just because you're a gun and you've put in so many hours of work into this, but you're relatable and you're easy for everyday people in Australia to connect with. and to make
Thank you.
the complex simple. And that's an absolute gift in and of itself.
Thank you. Yeah, I do definitely pride myself on that as well.
100%. Now let's keep moving on, Liv. We're up to number 3, and that says, and this one is, the broker said I can't borrow money. What's that about?
Do you know the most amount of people that come to me say, oh, I can't get into property because I can't borrow any money? The first thing I ask them is, how many brokers have you asked? They say 1. I'm like, so you're telling me your entire wealth is on the line because you went to only one person and they said no? Because you can't take no for an answer. You've got to be persistent. So whenever a broker says no, I get my clients to ask why. Or the most important question is, broker, what is the thing that's holding my borrowing capacity back the most? That's a very good question. Write that one down for those who are listening. Number 2, the next question you should always be asking is, hey, broker, how much extra do I need to earn in order to borrow whatever it is that you need to be able to borrow to buy a property? So, for example, let's just say at the moment, we can buy you, let's just say the minimum we can buy properties at the moment is $500,000, right? A really good sweet spot to be able to borrow money for most people, if we're buying at 500, is about 700,000. Because we need a bit of extra room to be able to pull out some equity for most people who are using equity. And we also need a bit of extra borrowing capacity just to have some wiggle room for the future. So let's just say we need 500,000. Let's just say we need, $700,000 in terms of borrowing capacity. And your broker has said you can only borrow 300. An amazing question is, broker, how much extra money do I need to be able to earn on paper in order to lift my borrowing capacity from $300,000 to $700,000? You would be surprised how little extra money that you need to make. And then what that does is that opens up your creative brain to think, oh shit, it's only that little? An extra 20 grand a year? Okay, what can I do to make an extra 20 grand a year? Could I take on an extra part-time job 1 day a week? That could solve every part of your problems.
Hey, Liv, is there an example of maybe a recent client that's had that similar issue that you've worked with?
Yeah, heaps.
What did they do?
So the biggest thing, again, that holds most people's wealth back is the PPR thing. So which is your home that you live in. PPR stands for
PPR. Let's say, yeah, that's what I was going to go. Yeah, PPR stands for place of principal residence.
Yes, principal place of residence. Yeah, it's either PPR or PPOR. Of course, I'm a manifestor. I'm just like, let's do the shortcut version. So PPR or PPOR. So that's one way. But to be honest, if you're emotionally attached to it, some people would, and for some people I say, how emotionally attached are you to the 4 walls that you live in? Could you potentially move out of that home and go rent just for 12 months, just to get it across the line? Some people are really open to it, some aren't. Great. If you're not open to it, fine. The next biggest thing typically to improve your borrowing capacity is actually increasing the income. A lot of people think it's about paying off debt. You'd be surprised, paying off debt doesn't make a huge difference because income has a greater weight than paying off debt. So I have a whole bunch of people who are earning, $80,000 a year as their base wage, and all they needed to do was just increase their income to 90 grand a year. So just an extra 10K could be the difference to get their borrowing capacity up an extra 200 grand. So I'll give you a bit of an indicator with how high interest rates are right now at the end of 2024. Without any debt, typically your lending, as a rough guide, ready, is roughly 5 times your income.
Okay. 5
times your income. So if you're earning, I'm going to do a quick calculation. So if you're earning 120 grand, let's just say, right, times 5, average, you roughly be able to earn about 600,000. Right? Now, there's a lot of variances in that. That's under the assumption you have zero debt, zero mortgage, zero debt anywhere else. You just have that as income. Mm-hmm. And that's assuming you have no kids either, right? Because they're a little bit of a liability. Bring down that borrowing capacity as well.
Yep.
I went on a tangent. What was the original question? I do that a lot.
No, that's okay. We were talking about the broker said you can't borrow money, and we were trying to get a live example of one where they've actually had this scenario where that happened and what they did.
Yes, yeah. So I'd say the home. So thank you for that. Scenarios are either A, moving out of their home, B, just increasing their income, C, believe it or not, is using equity that you might already have in your home to pay off other debt. So, for example, you might have a car loan. An average person comes to me with a car loan of $20,000. We might actually utilize the equity out of your home to get rid of that car loan. And believe it or not, because the way that banks judge us is they judge us based off the physical repayments that we make on that loan. So all we're doing is that rather having that car, like the $20,000 car loan on let's just say a 5 or a 7 year repayment, what we're doing is we're putting it on a mortgage instead that's over a 30-year repayment period, which then dramatically reduces your, dramatically reduces your repayments, which helps increase your borrowing capacity as well. So a lot of people come to us with car loans, credit cards, and we'll say, right, you might have 5 credit cards. We might say, great, there might be, say, $10,000 each. We'll say, right, keep one of them open for 5 or 10K limits. Let's shut down the rest for now. So sometimes it means closing off a credit card. And a lot of this stuff can be short-term as well. And some people don't need to shut down anything or pay off anything. Some people have borrowing capacity because their income's high enough to withstand it.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the 3 most common ways in Live. Like, so someone they'll move out of their primary residence and kind of rent vest for a period. They'll increase their income in some way, or they'll maybe restructure how some of their debt is, put it on the mortgage rather than having the car loan or the credit card sitting there.
Yep. Amen. And I think also to that point as well is also not making the assumption, back to point number 1 we're talking about, not making the assumption that properties are $800,000 or $700,000 or $1 million. Yeah. Also bringing down and looking into the what was the word I'm looking for? Yeah, looking at the fact that you can actually buy properties a lot cheaper than what you thought. That's probably the biggest.
I feel like my biggest takeaway from that myth, Liv, it's just, not taking no for an answer, because I feel like probably a lot of people do stop at the first broker, and in lots of scenarios in life, they'll get one expert opinion and then they'll just take that as gospel and they won't go talk to more people. So being persistent, not just taking the first no, that's probably my biggest takeaway from this one.
Yeah. And also, actually, whilst we're on the topic, I need to say something else really important, is that there are this is going to be mind-blowing for most people, there are over 440 lenders in Australia. Did you know that?
No, that's a lot.
Yeah. It could be more now. That was my research that I did 2 or 3 years ago. There could be more, right? Roughly 440 lenders out there willing to lend for mortgages, right? Now, out of all of those 440, if you go to just one bank and say, hey, bank, how much can I borrow? You're only going to that one out of 440 and asking them. Now, with a broker, most brokers, they have on their panel, so they have to do some sort of like integration and get approved to be able to refer, right? On their panel, most brokers only have about 30 to 40 of those lenders on their panel that they can assess your borrowing capacity to work out if you can borrow money. Now, I have a number of different brokers on my team who niche into different strategies, into different things. Like I have a broker specifically for business owners, a broker specifically for SMSF lending for super, a broker for employees, a broker for DVs and all this sort of stuff. So imagine if you go to broker number 1 and they're saying what you can borrow just off the 30 lenders they have on their panel. Imagine if you went to a completely different broker who had a completely different set of 30 lenders that were irrelevant, that were completely different to the other set. Well, now you've now gone and confirmed what your borrowing capacity is now against roughly 60 lenders. Okay. Now, if you add that up, just to let you know with the persistence thing there, when I was told I couldn't borrow money for super, so I was wanting to combine my super with my partners. And by the way, if you're listening to this, you can combine your super with up to 4 other people. Combine my super with my partners. And then I knew I had enough. It was about $100,000. That was it. And I was like, I know I have enough. That will be enough to fund a property. I went to 8 brokers. So the first 7 told me, how much money you got in your super? Nah, go away. You don't have enough. Boom, hang up. How much money you got in your super? Nah, go away. You don't have enough. And I was like, these guys aren't even asking me how much I'm buying properties for. Because I was buying properties for $150,000 back then, right? Yeah. So the persistence there, I didn't give up. I was like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And I didn't. And thank goodness I didn't, because broker number 8 said yes, and I bought a house with my super. So yeah, you got to be persistent.
There you go. I love that. That's such a good lesson. Not just in property, but just in life. Be persistent and don't take no for an answer. Find a way.
Find a way.
All right. So Liv, number 4, properties end up being vacant.
This is a big one. Do you know what? When I was building my wealth, this is not something I was ever worried about. Until I became a coach, I didn't realize that this is one of the number one fears or assumptions, I should say, assumptions that people tell me why they don't want to go and buy a property is they're worried about vacancies. And in my mind, I didn't know that this was such a big problem until I started asking people. Because on my first calls, when I speak to people, I'm like, what's stopping you from jumping onto realestate.com right now and buying a house? The answer 7 out of 10 times is vacancies. I'm worried about it being vacant. And so for me, in my world, I'm like, oh, that just doesn't happen. So here we go. Here's some facts for you to how to reduce your vacancies. Number 1 is buy in an area where there is huge demand. Again, that's going to come down to buying in a suburb that's in the top 1% suburbs. If you do that and there's a huge drive of people moving in there, then the vacancy rate is much lower. So in Australia, before the housing crisis got really bad, the average vacancy rate, I think it was 2.5 or 3, I think it was 3% broadly across Australia. Now it's at 1%, which is pretty bad. So it's bad for tenants, good for investors. And in the areas that we buy in, because we're able to forecast it, the vacancy rates are at about 1% now, but they're going to become 0.1%, 0.5%. So the vacancies are going to get much worse, which means there's a queue of people, families lining up, ready to rent your house. So that's number 1. Buy in an area where the vacancy rates are really low already and they're about to get worse. So that's number 1. Number 2 is make sure you use property managers, and not just any property managers, and then learn how to manage your property managers as well. So a lot of people out there who are like, oh, I have this big vacancy period. I ask them, how closely did you work with your property managers? And you know what? Most times they're like, oh, I'm like, how many times did you chase your property manager? They're like, oh, I haven't spoken to him in 3 weeks. And I'm like, well, that's your fault because you didn't stay on top of them. It's your money here and your wealth. No one else is going to care more about your wealth than you, just like your health, right? So take charge of it. So one of the things that I do is I educate people around how property managers will treat putting a property online. So for example, it should only take your property manager less than 24 hours to advertise your property online, because they can just go grab photos from when the house was sold from when you bought it. So they can just copy paste, use the photos. And also, if you put in the contract of sale before, when you go to buy a house and put in an offer, you can put in a little terms and conditions to say to the seller, hey seller, as a part of me buying this house off you, can I also please have your approval to advertise this property for rent before it settles? So whilst it's still legally yours, can I please just advertise it a couple of weeks out before settlement? Most sellers are so happy with that. They're like, yeah, fine, whatever, advertise it for rent. Mm-hmm. So getting ahead of the mark as well. So making sure that you're having people walk through the property before you even settle. That'll reduce your vacancies. The other thing is actually having a property manager. Do you know how many times people tell me that it's vacant? And then I'm like, have you got a property manager? They're like, no. And I'm like, well, that's your problem. You don't have an expert. You're not an expert at leasing properties.
It keeps coming back. Like a common thread is like, I guess the art of like delegation and, you know, like outsourcing some help so you're not trying to do everything yourself. I feel like this is a common theme throughout our conversation so far. It's like everyone's trying to do things themselves and not actually empowering other people to look after the bits that, you know, you're not so great at or that you need help on.
Yep. And do you know how many, like, property managers are so cheap? I would say property managers are one of the best ROIs that I get across my entire portfolio. Yep. It's only for most states, and this is for typically like WA, Queensland, South Australia, with, funnily enough, most of the top 1% suburbs are. The average percentage of property management is about 8%, roughly, somewhere between 7.5% to 8.5%. And it's just so worth it. The amount of problems that they solve for, you don't have to deal with anything. You just have to respond to an invoice. Something needs being fixed. Yep, no worries. Toilet's broken. Okay, give me 3 quotes. I'll go with quote number 1. Easy.
And I guess that's the thing, Liv. Like so many, I feel like it's such an Aussie mindset. It's just that DIY mindset is so ingrained in Australians that they feel like they have to do everything themselves. They have to manage the property themselves. That's why they won't buy interstate either, because they have to do everything themselves. But if they just fork out a little bit of money for this service, then it's going to save them so much, so much stress and so many worries. But it just takes, dipping into that pocket a little bit just to spend a little bit on a property manager or someone else.
Yeah, and look, I think my personal opinion is that mindset just simply comes from most people are taught growing up to focus on saving money, and you can only save so much, whereas the amount of money that you can make is unlimited. And so I'm always constantly thinking about where is the highest ROI of my time and my brain, where should that be spent? It shouldn't be spent trying to save $40 a week on property management when that's just going to cause me absolute headaches, So thinking about that from an energetic perspective, that has a compounding effect.
Okay.
So vacancies are actually really, really easy to mitigate. Also, what me and my team do is when we're forecasting portfolio planners and costs to hold properties, we also assume that you're going to have a 1 week vacancy per property per year, even though on average, tenants actually stay on their house, broadly speaking, on average across Australia, for 6.7 years. So we will pretend as if you're going to have turnover every 12 months, but actually you're likely to have them stay there for 6.7 years. I personally have had, out of 8 properties, I've had 2. No, I've had 1. No, 2. Out of 8 properties, I've had 2 properties only out of 9 years of property investing now. I've only had 2 houses where my tenants have turned over and had to find new ones. So all the other houses, tenants have stayed in there for at least the last 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I feel like it's a thing like where people focus on these future problems that aren't even problems, and it stops them from getting started on anything. They're worrying about all this stuff that might not even happen. And just like you're saying, 9 years, it's only ever happened a couple times in all the properties that you've done.
Yeah. So if your fear or belief system or concern around something is going to block you from building wealth, my question would always be, or how I train my clients, is to ask, how can we get around this, or how can we mitigate this? I would say majority of my job as a coach and a strategist, majority of what I do is help people build a property portfolio around risk mitigation. I'm always forecasting for different storms in the future. I teach you how to build wealth to be able to hold on during those storms. And how do we hold on? We'll get a forecast and we're going to mitigate all of these different things, such as vacancies. Another way to reduce vacancies is simply by buying properties that are cheaper. Buying properties where families are forced to rent those houses so that there is a queue lining up outside the door. There isn't a queue lining up outside the door for properties that are renting for, $100,000 a year, like, $2,000 a week. Guess what? The competition completely disappears. The more expensive you go up the ladder in terms of rent.
Gotcha.
There's not many people renting the properties at the high end. It's funny. I don't know have you ever listened to Andrew Tate before?
No, I know he's quite a polarizing kind of dude, but I haven't really listened to him, to be honest.
Yeah, very polarizing. So he was talking about how he was bidding for these houses to rent that were hundreds of millions of dollars. I think it was like $50,000 a week to rent a house, right? And he's putting in a bid, and then someone else is outbidding him, right? And they're like, okay, $70,000 a week, and he's like $100,000 a week, and he's like, hang on, who the hell has this much money that they're bidding me at these properties that are $100,000 a week to rent, right? Anyway, so it's like down the bottom of the barrel, the average, if rent is average between $500 to $800 a week, the competition it's dire. It is rough. There is not very many houses and a shitload of people. But as soon as you go and increase your rent just that little bit more into like the bracket between $1,500 a week to $3,000 a week, competition passes. And as soon as you get between the 300 above that, then the competition increases again, because money is like completely infinite once you get to that level. And there's people can pay like whatever they want at that level. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So if you're struggling to find a rental property, increase the rent.
Nice. Little tangent here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. little bit
Yes.
controversial maybe, but I feel like, probably like having a bit of a housing crisis in Australia. Some people probably have a bit of beef with property investors because they believe that they're buying all the property and it's making property expensive, and then like Joe Blow over here can't buy the family home or whatever. I'm curious to hear, your thoughts, coming from the property investing space. Talk to that point.
Okay. I love talking about this. And for context, I used to have online debates. I was that nerdy kid who was on Reddit when I was first starting out 9 years ago, and I was angry, and I would just have like online debates all the time, right? And then I'd read these other angry people on Reddit all the time being like, investors are bad. They're not. So anyway, the answer is I can factually prove it that owner occupiers are the ones that increase and that are causing the damage the most. But the number one people to blame here, actually, and I don't want to get into this rabbit hole because it's a little bit too deep, guys, we need to blame the system and the matrix. It's designed for us to get poorer because they print money, and inflation is actually the root cause to the problem. Inflation's the root cause. That's the number one reason why. So they print money. What happens is the more money in circulation, which means artificially properties just grow, which means rents just grow 12 months later behind that usually. So that's the real root cause of the problem. Second root cause to the problem is you're taught to be a little minion and be a 9-to-5 worker and not to understand the matrix at all because they need you to be at a job. And we know that like through business, that's where you really make money, and they don't teach you to do that, right? So root cause number one is inflation. Root cause number two is they want you to be dumb and not know this stuff. The root cause number three is owner occupiers overpaying for property because they're emotionally attached to a deal. So for example, my team, 81% of our properties are off market. 81%. Guess what happens with that? We know exactly what a property's worth. We get those properties off market. Usually we're given somewhere between 12 to 24 hours from the sales rep. The seller's like, right, we really want to work with the buyer's agent. So here's this off-market deal. We want to do it quickly and cheaper. Great, no worries. Let's do a deal. Let's come to an agreement. We know what a property will be worth. Let's just say we're like, yes, we are certain it's worth $450,000. Now, if we don't do the deal quick enough and they put it onto the market, on average, people are overpaying for properties right now $50,000 to $70,000 over the value.
Really?
Because it's gone to market and usually an owner-occupier buys it. So
is that because they're competing against investors though, do you think? So that's why they need to go up?
It's purely just because they're more emotional. And one, they're more emotional because they're going to live in it. And Australians are burnt out right now in just putting in offers because they're like, it's so tiring. Do you know how many properties I put in 40 offers on properties and they're all getting declined. So fuck it, I'll just overpay. That's what they're doing. A lot of people. Now, so you've got that aspect of it as well. And also, don't forget, there will always be Australians. There will always be people who just can't work it out, who just can't seem to get their financial shit together. They will just always exist. So we need landlords. If we don't have landlords, if we don't have investors, that is one less property that is that a tenant can rent. We have Australia's worst housing shortage. We need to have landlords. And also to let you know, the average landlord in Australia, it's not some rich person from fucking China. I can tell you that much right now. The average Australian is a mum and dad investor who owns one home and they bought one investment property and they're financially struggling to keep it afloat. Also because the system has told most Aussies to do this thing called negative gearing, which we won't get into too much. But, and so they're struggling to hold on to property.
Okay.
So no, it's not investors causing the problem. In fact, investors help by buying and having our property available for rent and not overpaying for real estate.
Yeah, so there's systematic issues at that level, which we won't dive into in this episode because that's some deep stuff. But again, I guess the other thing as well is, investors, they're just learning the game and they're playing the game, which anyone can do, in anything. So I feel like that's all you do, whether you're playing the stock market, whether you're playing property, whether you're playing crypto business. It's like learning the rules of the game and then playing by the rules. It's not as if investors are breaking the rules. They're playing by the laws that are there and what the system says you can do. So, okay.
I'll just teach people where the rules are and say, these are the boundaries. This is where you can play in. Learn them.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I like that. Now let's keep moving on to Myth 5, which is tenants trash Properties.
This is also another really big myth. I'd probably say it's quite close
Actually,
to
Liv,
vacant.
Liv,
Yes.
before you dive into this, can I just say something? Because I'm also, I guess, a rent investor. We rent here in Adelaide.
Uh-huh.
And again, this is, for me, it's like an energetic, even though I rent here, I treat this place as if, or we treat this place as if we own it. We actually really look after this place and we value living here. And we, even though we're renting here, we still want to add value to this place. So when we eventually do move out, we've left this asset in a better place. And I feel like energetically, that's a great place to operate from as a tenant. And we do have a property back, you know, in our hometown where we've had people as well. So I feel like me being a tenant now, it's like I want to look after this place and treat it as my own, because I know if you care about your stuff, you will be given more good stuff to care about. So I just want to kind of throw in my little experience there before you dive into unpacking this one.
Well done. And you know what? I would say most people that come to my world feel the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, it's good good karma. If I'm gonna treat this place with respect, my tenants will do the same thing. That's how I've always believed and moved as well. That every house that I've ever lived in that I personally rent, I'm exactly the same as you. In fact, I'll probably treat it better. I love where I live. It's my environment. And I teach my clients to do the same thing. Instead of being, there's a different mindset between being a landlord versus being an investor. So a landlord is very much like I am the lord of this land and I must control this thing, right? Whereas I tell my investors to step back, right? Take a step back. Let it be their home, because it is their home, right? They're living in it, not you. And emotionally remove yourself from it and just learn to control the asset from a numbers perspective. Because what you really want to control at the end of the day is the capital growth and the cash flow. That's why you're actually doing this in the meantime. It's the main reason why you're doing it. So for me, just for context, I've never, ever had a tenant trash any of my properties ever. Now, in saying that, just because I haven't experienced that doesn't mean that it doesn't occur, because it absolutely does occur. I would say, where did you hear that story from? If you believe that tenants trash houses, first of all, go and investigate where you heard that from. It's probably someone who rented out the property privately and didn't use the property manager. That's number one. Number two, this day and age, thanks to technology, the background checks that are done on tenants these days have advanced a lot in the last 5 years. Property managers they now have access to view, I think it's like a 10-year history report on your tenants in the past. So you can really start to paint a picture as to what they were like as well. And it's another reason why you need to have property managers. So one of the things property managers, you need to put yourself in the shoes of a property manager. If you think about it, if you're going to hire them, they're going to be like the middleman. I think being property managers is the worst job. One of the worst jobs in Australia to be doing. I definitely would not want to do this job. If you think about it, they're the middleman. So they have to deal with the landlord or the owner complaining or whinging or whatever on one side, and then they've got the tenant to deal with. And tenants are always the harder ones out of the property managers. Property managers just want shit, dealt with. The investors. So it is in the best interest of the property manager to hire a really good tenant in the first place, because they're the ones that are going to have to deal with them. And they're the ones that meet them on the ground, and they can be like, oh, yeah, you're going to be a headache or not.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then, Liv, with this one, yes, sorry to interrupt, Liv. What I'm hearing with this one is, when this has probably happened, it's probably because people have been looking after themselves and not doing a great job. But if you have the proper property managers looking after it, it's very unlikely that this will happen. Because again, it's going to be more work for the property manager, so they want to make sure they have high quality tenants in there to save the headaches.
Yep. And also, in the areas, here's a fun fact for you. Do you know when there might be a suburb that is the top 1% suburb, and maybe that suburb right now, let's just say it's like the Gunji area. It's where everyone on the dole lives, right? Now, that could be a perception that it is, like a low socioeconomic area. But through all of our data, there's going to be things in the future that's going to drive a huge boom into that particular suburb. Do you know the amount of people that we would say, okay, let's buy in this area. This is the best house for you in the best area. And they're like, well, I've done a Google review and everyone said that the area is shit. That is the perfect area that I would want to buy in. Every single area, bar one, every single property that I've bought has been in a low socioeconomic suburb where I personally would feel unsafe to live in, but families have no other option but to move there because of affordability. And then eventually it ends up becoming a nicer area. Eventually. I'll give you an example. There's a suburb in Melbourne. It's called Frankston South. So Frankston South. Now, when I was growing up, it was known as like the Stadville. It was like known as like the biggest area of murders in Melbourne, right? In like the late 90s, early 2000s. And when I was growing up, all my parents and their parents and friends, would always like bag out this particular suburb. And I was kind of like grew up in that area. I had someone that raised me there. And now it's quite an affluent area to be able to live. Now there's still a bit of gunginess going on. I was literally there just a couple of weeks ago. And I was just like looking around, but I'm like, this is up and coming, right? It's by the ocean. It's got great resources, great area to have invested in years ago, not now. And so, yeah, the fact that tenants trash your properties is just not true. I even had, back to the vacancy thing, during COVID, the government, so Dan Andrews, the Victorian government, had announced and said, okay, tenants don't have to pay their rent anymore. So if you're in Victoria and you're listening to this right now, yes, in 2020, there was a period during COVID, you didn't have to pay rent. My grandparents were calling me and they're like, sweetie, are you okay? You're going to have to sell your properties. Because I lived in Victoria and I started off buying properties in Victoria, even though I own properties all over Australia now. And at the time, that was where most of my wealth was. And I was like, nah, I'm not worried. Guess what? Not a single tenant didn't pay their rent. Every single one of them who didn't have to pay their rent, not a single person was delayed and not a single person chose not to pay their rent. Every single one of them did. Why? Because people know that there's a housing shortage. People know that, like, well, if they don't, they're not going to be able to live here. They're just going to kick me out anyway later on when they stop paying, when they're allowed to turn it back on again. So that just doesn't happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they had the option. They could have chosen not to pay rent during that time, but you found they still did pay rent during that time.
Yep, all of them.
There you go. That's very surprising. I would have thought people would be like, oh, awesome, I don't have to pay rent for this period here. But so you're saying people did still do that?
Because even if you choose to do that, that will still be on your record. People always know. So like as an investor now, when my property manager picks up the report, they'll be able to say they were given the option to not pay the rent back in 2020. Straight away, I'd be like, nah, I don't want you in my property then.
Okay, so it's going to go on the record. It's going to be a red flag, and that's it. Like it is, like the rental market it can be tough to get into. Like I experienced that coming to Adelaide from the country. So you want to be presenting as a high quality candidate if you're trying to get property. So you don't want those red flags.
Don't want those red flags. And then the last thing to mitigate risks for vacancies or tenants trashing a property is we have insurance. That's the last resort for everything. You have landlord's insurance, which protects you from, which specifically protects you from tenants trashing the joint or protects you from vacancies because it was trashed.
Okay.
So let's just say a tenant was vacating. Oh, and there's also bond, right? Let's just say that's the reason why you hold on bond as well. You can withstand that. Let's just say they trashed the house and it's $5,000 worth of damage, but the bond is only $2,000. Then that's what you have insurance for the other $3,000 as a backup option as well. So that's quite critical.
Okay. Plenty of ways to cover that one then. So I feel like we've covered that pretty good then, Livo. So let's keep on moving on to number 6, which is you need money in your bank account to start.
Oh, you don't need any money is the answer. You don't need any money. $0 in your bank account in order to invest in real estate, but you do need capital from somewhere. So what I mean by capital is we need cash that can come from either physical cash savings and or equity. So most, I would say somewhere between 60 to 70 people that come my way have zero money in their bank account, and we physically use equity out of an existing property. So what is equity? Equity is the value of your house. So whatever you think that first property is worth, and this could be your home, minus 10% that value, then minus the debt. That leftover number is your equity. And if you have a good 100 to 150 grand worth of equity in your home, that is literally, we just pull that out. We say, hey, go to your broker, say, hey, broker, can I please cash out this equity? All right. And then the broker goes to the bank, they cash it out. It's hardcore equity. Now, caveat to this, you need to have borrowing capacity to be able to access it. But most people's borrowing capacity is all improvable. And then, so what happens is you can go to the bank and say, hey, bank, can I please have that equity? And you literally cash it out. It's hardcore cash. It lands in your bank account one day, right? Usually 6 to 8 weeks later, lands in your bank. And then you use that money in order to pay for everything to acquire a property. So you then can use that equity to pay for buyer's agents, coaches like me, the deposit, the stamp duty, the pest and building inspection, the conveyances and the lawyers and things that you need. Every single thing that you need in order to buy your next house can purely come from equity. You don't need any of your own cash savings. Now, I thought this was so common knowledge till I created a TikTok account. I started putting out all these videos. My videos were going viral because I was like, you can use your equity and you don't need any cash savings. And then everyone was like, can you do that? I was like, yeah. So it turns out it's not as common knowledge is what I thought. That's the reason why I chucked it on this list. You can just use equity. Zero cash in your account.
What about Liv? Just say someone, they've only got like 20K cash. No, they don't have a home, so they don't have any equity yet, but they're a hungry, ambitious person. They want to get their foot in the game. Like, what would you suggest to that person how they can get their foot in the game? So they don't have access to equity and maybe just a little bit of cash. What would they do?
Yep. So it's all going to come down to your rate to save money. So it depends on how quickly your savings rate can keep up with the rate of properties. I have this exact example. So just give me a sec. I'm just going to open up my blinds for one moment.
All good.
So depends on the rate of which you can save. So I'm going to use my hands for those. Hopefully those who are listening to this are listening on YouTube. If not, please move over to our YouTube channels. So I'm going to use my left hand here as the rate of which houses are going up by, and this hand over here is the rate of your savings or your bank account going up. Let's just say you're breaking even right now, meaning that you have enough money. Actually, no, sorry, I'm going to go back a step. I'm going to use your example. Let's just say this is the how much money you need to buy the house, and this is the rate of houses going up. And this hand, here's your savings rate, which is just a little bit less. If the rate of properties are going up much quicker than your savings rate, then I would say to those people who have $20,000, that is enough to buy a house with all of the grants if you went down the first homeowners grant route. So I literally had a call with a woman this morning who was in this exact same situation. I said, fuck the investing. Don't do that right now. I said, your savings rate or her income was so low that she wasn't able to save that much at all. Yeah. So it meant that the properties were going to outperform her savings rate. So then I simply said to her, go to a broker and go and work out what are all the grants that you can get a hold of. There's about 3 or 4 really good grants in Australia that would allow you. Now, a lot of the grants, I refer to them as a last resort because they're so restrictive. So, for example, some of the grants out there at the moment mean that you have to, now don't quote me on them, I don't keep up with grants because it's not a thing that I do. I don't specialize in niche in these grants at all. I help typically investors. But I want everyone to just get their foot in the door. I just want them to do whatever the hell they can to get their foot in the door for that first property. And so usually a lot of those grants mean building a brand new property. Now, if you watch my content, you would know that investors shouldn't be buying new houses. Again, though, if it's the only way to get your foot in the door, then fuck it, do it. Buy the new off the plan property, which I don't align to typically. But if it's a way for you to get your foot in the door, do it. And the reason why you need to do a lot of the off the plan properties is because that's where a lot of the grants are, because they're trying to influence Australians to build new properties. And that typically means buying a house that's out in the middle of nowhere because you need to be able to find land that's cheap enough, right? And then you also typically need to do a new build, which might take a year or two just for it to get built. And especially with now, because we have Australia's worst housing building and construction issue in Australia as well. So that's my long-winded answer. Use the grants, and it is very likely that you could get your foot in the door with $15,000 to $20,000 of money in your bank account.
Okay, nice. Okay, that's good to know because I wasn't expecting that answer. Because I was more thinking, maybe you could go. Potentially, your parents have some, they're boomers. They got some money. Maybe you could go to the bank of mum and dad, or I don't know. Could you kind of pull your money together with a mate and say, "Hey, let's build this property portfolio"? Like, could that be an option that you've seen as well? Like, I'm sure people must have.
Yeah. So that was the next thing I was going to say is if you have a mum or dad, or a close family member, or I don't know, a grandparent or someone that has equity in a home, they can do a thing called guarantors, which is where they can guarantee you money. So they use the equity from their home as the deposit and as the funds to get your foot in the door. I do have a client going through that right now. Hello, Selim, because he's probably going to be watching this because he loves my content. And so right now we're helping him. So he came to me, actually nearly the exact same scenario. Thanks for bringing it up. So he had $30,000. He actually had 10 grand cash. Then he had another $20,000 in shares. He cashed it out. So he now has $30,000. Now, he was adamant. He's like, Liv, I don't want to do the first homeowners grants. I really want to work with you. He's obsessed with me. And he's like, I really want to work with you. I really want to do the investing thing. How do I do it? And I said, okay, so you've got $30,000. That's enough to pay for things like me, like the coach and buyer's agents and extra stuff. Whereas he's now borrowing $100,000 off his parents' house. So his parents own a home. They have enough equity in their home. That $100,000 will pay for things like the big costs like the stamp duty and the deposits. That the banks will allow that. But you do need a tiny little bit of money to pay for things like if you wanted me, for example, on your team or etc. Like I couldn't give a rat's ass. Honestly, I've got like a queue of people. But if you really want me, this guy really wanted me, right? And really wanted the professional services. So the only main limiting fact with grants, now again, you need to triple check this with brokers because this changes all the time. At the moment, from what I know, pulling out money as a guarantor, so where we're pulling equity from mum or dad's property. Excuse me one moment. Where we're pulling equity out from mum and dad's house or a family member's house, typically the restriction around that right now is lenders will only allow you to use that funds for the stamp duty and the deposit. But there are a few other bills that add up that might be, $10,000, $20,000 worth. That's where you're probably going to need some cash funds for that. So yes, that is another option. But what I typically find with people who don't have the cash, like the scenario of the woman that I spoke to this morning, she had 0 parents that had properties. I didn't have any parents who had any wealth. It's one of the main drivers I got into property. So some people don't have the bank of mum and dad to go to. That's the reason why the first initial scenario I gave you was to just get your foot in the door and do the grant thing. So yeah, it's either the grant thing or the guarantor thing are the two biggest things.
I guess it's also like, if people listening to this go back and listen to episode 15, you spoke about all the sacrifices that you made to get up that initial cash to get your foot in the door. And I feel like, if you want to get your foot in the door in property, like you've just got to make those sacrifices initially.
Yeah, you got to make it in some way. And yeah, is it harder for us youngies, us millennials, or people who don't have wealthy parents like I didn't? Like something's got to give. So yeah, there are other ways that you can save your money quicker. And I would say my number one advice there is collapse time. I think we talked about that on the other episode we did. Collapsing time.
We did talk about collapsing time. So we'll go back to that one, guys, if you want to listen to that, because that was a juicy conversation as well. I loved that actually from your sensei. What was his name? Sensei. What was your sensei's name?
Oh,
your guru.
His name is Muhammad.
Muhammad, that's it. That's the one. Yeah. Mr. Muhammad, collapsing time. I remember that one. That was good. All right, Liv, so let's keep moving on. We're up to number 7 now, which is the process is hard and confusing.
Yeah. You know what? I believe this myth actually to be true. I do. And though there are also people out there like me who can actually just hold your hand through the entire process as well. So again, this comes down to some of the high quality questions that you ask your team. And you can simply ask all of your team and don't assume that you just need to ask one person. So as an example, say you have a broker on your team, an accountant, a buyer's agent, consistently ask them, hey, what's the next step? What do I need to do? But also, what are you going to do? What are your next steps? Like, I know that I don't need to do this, but then what do you need to do in order to get to the next step? And again, I'm talking to the real generators out there in human design, the 37% of the population who are just like, yes, very process driven. I don't believe it is hard. I just don't believe that there are people out there who are very good at explaining the process. And that's what I'm amazing at doing, is explaining the next steps and providing heaps of context around, right, you're going to go through this thing, this step, and you're going to have to fill out these documents. It's going to occur in about a week from now. And when that happens, you're going to need to set aside probably a good 45 minutes to do this thing. Okay? And this is exactly what you do. So if you are struggling with the process or you think it's really confusing, again, reach out. Happy to help.
Yeah, so I guess it is a hard and confusing process. Like for me, property's not my game, so I'd find it hard. But I guess that's where, when you pay an expert like yourself, you're paying for peace of mind and someone who's got the certainty, someone who's already done it before, so that you don't have to be confused and find it hard. You literally just have to be guided by someone like yourself.
Yeah. Follow an action item list. So I'm constantly writing up an action item list to my clients. I'm like, these are the 5 things you need to do. You're going to do them in order of priority. You're going to do this one, then this one, then that one, then that one. And then once you've done those things, so I'm not overwhelming you, there's no point in me giving you steps 10 to 20 when you haven't done steps 0 to 10. So I'm saying, focus on these steps first, then I'll give you your next action items.
That's a good way to do it. Because, again, people, they love the certainty, and people love ticking things off as well, typically. So if you've just got that nice little action plan, you just go through it one by one, and then just trust I think that's the other thing, trusting. Like when you're working with the coach, someone like yourself, Liv, it's trusting the process. Because I feel like a lot of times people can rebel against the process, but if you trust the process, have faith in the process, then things will be smooth.
Yep. Amen. That's moving on to the next segment. Trust.
Actually, there we go. I don't know who to trust. Well, you know Liv now, so hopefully you can trust Liv. But okay, talk to this one.
You know what? When I was building my property portfolio, I seriously didn't know who to trust, because there is a lot of what I call like the dodgy, like off the plan, developers rocking up in their suit and their Lambo trying to sell you off the plan property, and I just hated it. I was like, ugh, I want to vomit by that industry. And when I was actually still working as a call center worker at Optus, I thought, I want to help people build a property portfolio, so I'm going to become a buyer's agent. So I enrolled in to do my buyer's agency license, right? And I get into this course and I'm like, I despise this entire industry so much. I've got the ick from most of them, because they're just like, all they care about is profit. They didn't really care about people. They didn't really care about, making an impact. And I just realized a lot of the real estate industry it had this stigma about, the people rocking up in the suit and the Lambo, and I just didn't align to that at all. And so for me, I was like, how can I be someone that's relatable, that can help the average Aussie who isn't necessarily a rich person? It's just an everyday average Aussie that's trying to get by, and so I really wanted to target that. And so over time, I had to learn to either, for some people out there, they're going to be process driven, and they're either going to be like, exactly what questions do I need, Olivia, and what do I need to ask to make sure I have vetted people that I trust in my team, or there's going to be other people who purely work off feeling their what's the word I'm looking for? You used the word earlier.
Intuition or gut?
Intuition. Thank you. Intuition. Yeah. And they're those people who work off intuition. I'm very intuition led. So you just need to work out, are you intuition led based off, the energetics of the person that you're speaking to? That's number one. Or number two, you're based off process, where you might need to see stuff in writing and contracts written and the terms and conditions to everything. Or I have one kid at the moment who I'm really trying to shake him up at the moment. He's so young. He's only 20. He's the most analytical client I have. And fuck me, he's more analytical than most of my clients in their 50s. And this guy he's not fully he's not intuitively led at all. So he needs to physically see like 100 testimonials. So he already fully trusts me. He's been following me for 12 months and watching everything and utilizing all of my free content, which is great. And now he's jumped on board because he's built the trust with me. But now he's now learning to trust the people that I'm suggesting for him to use, right? Whether it be brokers, accountants, buyers, whatever. So now he's relearning that. And so the way that I have to coach him is I'm like, right, look at the terms and conditions of things, right, to build that trust there. Look at testimonials, right? Go onto their websites, get familiar with those people and then make your decision based off those things as well.
That's good. Yeah, I think the other thing as well with this one, Liv, it's like, asking the people like, is this what you're actually doing yourself? Like, do you have the result yourself? Are you credible? Because I mean, if we're talking, say, like financial advice, for example, there's a lot of financial advisors out there, but a lot of them don't drink from the same thing that they preach. So I feel like, whenever I'm talking to people, it's like, I want to know what they're actually doing with their money. And it's like, are you actually following the advice that you're giving to me? Like, is this actually what you do? Because if they don't, then I'm not going to trust that person. I want to see that they've got results doing what they say they're going to do. Does that make sense?
Amen. You know what? Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's one of the most important vital points to bring up. It's interesting, like Robert Kiyosaki talks about this in his book called Fake. Have you read that?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
It's basically about fake teachers, fake news, fake something else. Anyway, and he talks about the fake teachers being what you just said, which is the people who are giving out advice for things that they haven't actually done or achieved themselves. So yeah, you need to make sure that whoever you're hiring is aligned to the way that you are or that you can build a property portfolio. I'll give you an example. There's a guy in the property industry who he's a real spruiker of buying properties inside Sydney, and he only believes in buying blue chip properties that are $1 million to $2 million in Sydney. And he now I don't like to this is not to put anyone down that is a competitor of mine. This is just to surface and say, okay, like what strategy are they following? Because this guy, he advocates for doing that strategy. However, that strategy only works for existing rich people in Sydney, right? Whereas his strategy is not going to work for the average Australian who's people that I work with, right? Now, I'm all for if you talk about a strategy that only works for a certain category, then just target that category and say the other type of people, okay, the mum and dads, if it's not going to work for them, don't pretend it does. That's what I didn't like. I didn't like that there were people out in the property industry that were saying, yeah, you should just do this strategy and it's a blanket rule and it works for everyone, because it just doesn't. There's 50 different ways of building wealth through real estate. They all work. It's just a matter of which ones are going to align to your lifestyle, your values, and your sleep at night factor.
Nice. I like that. Yep. And you've got to resonate with the messenger. Like, if someone resonates with you, Liv, that's gonna be a good relation. You've got the results, they can trust you and they resonate with you. Whereas, Billy Bob over there, they might not resonate with that person. So I feel it's like you said, there's so many ways to build wealth, whether it's property or something else, but you've got to align with the messenger,
Amen.
I had a guy. It's not going to work.
Yeah, you're right. I had a guy that came to me with $40 million net cash. He's like, Liv, got 40 mil. I was like, okay, great. And I was honest with him. And I said, you need these guys, all of the people that I have on my team. But I said, you don't need me as a coach. And he's like, why? He's like, but I want to work with you. And I was like, I don't want you to work with me. I'm going to tell you why. Because your net wealth is so grand that you should not be spending a single minute of time with me on learning this stuff. You should be putting all of your effort into just getting the teams to just buy property for you in the back end. And you should be solely focused your energy on your business and when you make money, because that's your highest ROI. Now, I had another guy, similar net wealth, come to me, but so the guy with the 40 million, I told him, don't work with me, just work with the remainder of my team though, because they will be your doers and just do everything. Whereas I teach a lot of people and hold their hand, right? And whereas I had another guy, similar net wealth, he came to me with 16 million cash, but he didn't come to me because he really wanted to, for the purpose of increasing his capital. The other guy, 40 million guy, he purposely came to me to increase capital wealth. Great. Utilize my team. This is what you got to do. But the other guy who came to me 16 mil, similar, he wanted to increase his wealth, but there was an additional layer to him. His difference was that he wanted to inspire his kids, and he wanted to teach his children exactly what I did and where I got to, because he had this 21-year-old son that he was trying to inspire. He's like, I want my son to do what you're doing, Olivia. I said, okay, great. So what he wanted to do was learn everything that I did so that he could teach his son the same thing. And he goes,
so you worked with him?
Pardon?
So did you actually work with this guy?
Yeah. So I worked with this guy.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now his son is, because the dad is like watching everything, right? And he's watching all my content. But this was a form of investing for him, right? For him, he's like, I'm willing to lose money on my time and in my business, because he could have made millions of dollars based on the time that he was spending with me. But it wasn't about making money for him. It was about him inspiring his children. But first of all,
did you work with his son as well?
So I'm not directly working with his son, no, but it's so funny because the son like watches my stuff and he messages. Sometimes he sends me a message, but he's a very withdrawn person, whereas his dad's complete opposite. His dad's just like, let's go. I want to learn all this stuff. So his son's not like a real go-getter like he would be. But his son thinks that I'm really, he thinks that I'm really famous. And so I go and hang out with his dad because his dad lives local to me. Actually, I moved into the same suburb as his dad. And so I hang out on his dad's yacht all the time, right? And so he'll take a photo of us together and he'll send it to his son. And his son is just in disbelief because he thinks that I'm so amazing. And he'll go, hey, mate, look, I'm hanging out with Olivia today. And he's like, no way, Olivia wouldn't hang out with you, because obviously you're a kid and you don't think that your dad's cool, right? Or your parents are cool. Yeah. So his dad's also doing this to inspire him in a way that his son sees me as an authority and sees that I'm really cool. So that's the way that he's in a roundabout way trying to inspire his son by hanging out with me. So there you go.
That's cool. That's cool, because his son's obviously into it as well, because I think sometimes parents can maybe force their kids down a particular path, but that's cool that his son is actually like wants to do that path, which is a very different kind of dynamic.
I'm pretty sure that son found me first online. Yeah,
really?
There you go.
Well, there you go.
And then say, hey, Dad, look at this girl.
Well, there you go. All right, well, let's keep moving on. That was a good one, so I don't know who to trust. Number 9, Liv, is you need to earn a lot of money.
Myth busted. Not true. I have, I think we kind of tapped into this a little bit before, that the average borrowing capacity is roughly 5 times your income without any debt. Depending on the lender, it could be roughly 6 times your income. That's just kind of average at the moment. So I have everyday Aussies come to me that are doing normal jobs, that are building a property portfolio. I have single mums come to me who have come out of a divorce. I have a lot of DV women who come to me because they trust the femaleness in me and really trust me. So I have women who've been in a DV relationship, which is domestic violence, if you didn't know, who have stepped away from a relationship, who are financially abused and come to me with money, and they're like, Liv, I have $200,000 or $300,000 of the sale of the house, but I don't have a job because I can't work because I've got 3 kids at home. I physically can't earn an income. For some of those parents, they might have $100,000 worth of borrowing capacity and that's it. And we utilize that cash to buy a cash flowing property portfolio to increase their wage and their income through a cash flowing property so that we can borrow more, or so that they can at least make money of that. They can put that money to work until they can go to work when their kids potentially, have gone to school in a couple of years, like the little young ones, now gone to school and now they can go back and get a job. I have people who work at Coles. I have a single mum at the moment. Oh, here's a fun story for you. I have a single mum. I shared this one on my stories a few times actually. And Marshy, I think I shared this when you had just gone off on socials. This is really cool. Got a lot of inquiries from this. So single mum of 3, Her husband died without any notice. Like it was quite a shock. He died about 2 or 3 years ago from a brain aneurysm.
Mm-hmm.
Then she got his life insurance payout, which was not much money. I think it was like 300 grand, maybe a bit more, 400 grand maybe. That was it. And then, I not shit you, then she gets diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Serious?
Yeah. Husband dies of an aneurysm. A year or two later, she gets diagnosed with an aneurysm. Now, just before she got diagnosed with this aneurysm, she was suffering from headaches and she couldn't see when she was driving and stuff. Actually, I think she's a single mom of 4. Actually, I think she's got 4 kids. And she came to me at the start of the end of 2023, so about a year ago. And she's like, Liv, what do I need to do to increase my brain capacity? And I was like, okay, we can do this, go get a job. And she had never had a job as an adult because she was used to being a stay-at-home mum, right? Yeah. And when the husband died, she just had no mental capacity to do anything. So she ended up moving in with her parents and their 3 or 4 kids just so that she could mentally cope and survive and get through the death, right? So anyway, so she comes to me and she's like, and then she's on. She's like, I'm ready to go, Liv. What do I need to do? And I'm like, go get yourself a job. It'll really help. She's like, yeah, I really want to get a job. So she went and got a job at filling the shelves at Coles at night, right? So then she started doing that. And I said, if you choose a part-time job, we can typically use the income from within 3 months of you starting the job. And then we can use that income. As opposed to if it was casual, it would mean you'd have to be 6 months into the role before we can really start using the income. So anyway, so she goes to get this part-time job. And then she comes back to me and I'm like, oh, she's gone kind of quiet. It's been like 5 or 6 months. I thought I'd check in. She's like, oh, sorry, I got 3 months into my job, got diagnosed with the brain tumor. And I'm like, fuck me, this poor woman. She's copping it. But she was so happy. She looks at life like it's the best thing on earth. And she's so grateful, just so nothing could get her down. Anyway, goes into surgery, has the brain tumor removed, whatever. And then she's spending a couple of months really because she couldn't drive, right? Because she got her license taken away from her because she wasn't legally allowed to drive because of her brain tumor. So she had time, so she had to get medically passed. So while she's waiting to get her license back, she's like, well, can't go get the job, can't drop the kids off at school. So I'm just going to learn and dive into all of Olivia's videos. So she's learning. And then anyway, she comes back to me. She's like, Liv, I'm good to go. I'm cleared. I can have borrowing capacity, right? But what we worked out was that we could actually buy properties with the cash that she had, and we would buy one outright to begin with. So to begin with, we actually just bought her a property outright with a $300,000 cash, which was a little unit, which is going to give her instant income because there's no debt on it. So it's going to improve her borrowing capacity from day one, as well as her going to do her night full job. And I was like, fuck it. She's only earning, it was like $70,000 or $75,000 a year. That's it. And we're now going to build her an empire just off that. One property to begin with that she had without any income. So there are ways that we can get around it as well. I have everyday Aussies come into me who, I have a lot of coppers, a lot of teachers, a lot of nurses who come to me. That are on 100, somewhere between $80,000 to $120,000 of income. I mean, the average Australian income at the moment in Australia is $96,000. And so, so that I would say is the average sort of Australian that comes to me with that sort of income. So you don't need to earn a lot of money is the answer. I didn't. Also, for context, I earned $55,000 a year at Optus. There we go. Don't say that publicly that often. I earned 55 grand, and my partner earned $50,000 working in admin.
Yeah, so
and I got 5 years.
I guess that's the thing, because a lot of people probably think, investing or property investing is just for wealthy people who have money. But it's definitely not. And it's great that, there's people like you, Liv, who are making it accessible and reachable for just everyday people. Like that's, it's such a good problem that you're solving for people to kind of get their foot in the door and to help them to build wealth and to have choice, despite, not being wealthy to begin with.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really inspired to democratize real estate investing in Australia. I just want the average person to be able to do it because I don't like the system, the matrix. So I want to escape from it. And then once I have escaped from it, I want to help other people escape from it, which is the 9 to 5, I believe. Anyway.
You've escaped from the Matrix, though, haven't you? Or is there more to escape from?
There's way more. I don't think you're elite and you can escape from much until you have at least somewhere between a net wealth, probably somewhere between 10 to 15 mil.
Okay.
I'm a bit of an extremist, though, for context, right? Like, yes, I've replaced my partner's income. I've retired my partner, thank God, to real estate, and I've done the same thing with my mum. So I financially look after the people around me, right? That's true. But to me, what I believe the matrix is, it's first of all removing you from your 9-to-5 income, and I'm not fully removed yet, right? I still have an active business that I'm actively involved in. But to me, a real escape is me having so much wealth that no matter what, the government can't tell me what to do. That's my personal escape from the matrix. Is being able to say, fuck you, if I need to get on my private jet tomorrow, I can, and I can go to any country in the world, and I can afford to pay for a passport in 6 different countries and pay them 50,000, them 100,000, whatever I need to pay in different countries to get into different countries, and just live there if I needed to escape. That's what I want. Thanks to human design, you'll understand that that's what manifestors want. We want to escape and have peace. So that's one of my motivators.
Okay, so is that one of like your kind of vision pieces in the future, that you want to fully escape the matrix?
Yeah, I just want to have the option, so I'm never controlled.
So the choice, you have the choice to not be controlled ever.
Correct. And the only way to do that is to be ultra wealthy.
Well, I'm curious. How are you being controlled right now?
I got to pay taxes. I don't want to fucking pay taxes. Build wealth.
So when you get to 10, 15 mil net worth, won't you still have to pay taxes?
So I can choose not to pay taxes now. That's one way, but you just hinder your wealth, because if you choose to use property as your way to build wealth, if you choose business is the number way to build wealth. If you build up companies and then sell it for a profit, that is the number one way to actually get rich. If you look at the rich list, everyone's business owners, not property investors. But it is factually true that 90% of millionaires are made from real estate, though. And I truly believe that 98% of people cannot hack business and don't have what it takes. So therefore, the next best bet is real estate. And that's just my belief system. So where was I going with that? Taxes. Anyway, so it's not just about taxes. It's just about me saying, for me, and again, this comes into a human design thing, manifestors, we just like to not be controlled. It's our number one thing. We're born on this earth controlled by society, and we don't like it. So we want to feel our number one goal is to reach peace. What do I need for peace? Well, I need freedom. What do I need to have ultimate freedom? Is I need to have an ultimate amount of wealth. I need heaps of cash flow so that you can't tell me what to do. Doesn't matter if it comes from the government or it comes from state government or whatever. I just want the ultimate freedom to do whatever the hell I want. And I know that I look at my mentors who are worth $100 million and they are only just free. So the version of free for me is I can pay to go to any country whenever I want, however I want, and never have to swap my time for money and be able to do the same thing for my family around me. So that's a shitload of money. So, but the average Australian is just like, fuck, I just wanted $100,000 to replace my income so I didn't have to work. That's enough for them. For me, that's not enough.
Okay, interesting. Well, thanks for sharing some of your values and your vision with us as well, and where you want to get to, which I'm sure you will.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Well, Liv, we're up to the final one, which is number 10. Lending is hard for business owners. Now, I've definitely experienced this one myself, being a business owner, because my income is all over the place. Talk us through this one.
Okay, so I don't believe that lending for business owners is harder. I just believe it's different.
Okay. And
it is very different, and it's just not spoken much about. And if we take a bit of a couple steps back, who designs the loan terms and conditions? Employees, 9-to-5ers at the banks. So they've got their vision and they're constantly looking at the 9-to-5ers because they're designing it. So that's number one. Number two, it is factually true, as I was just kind of mentioning before, I don't know the exact stats, maybe Marsha may be able to answer this. I think it's only 1% of business owners get past 5 years. or able to hold on to a business past 5 years. So from a bank's perspective, they're like, well, we need you to prove yourself more, Mr. Business Owner. Fair point. I would too if I was lending out money. Damn straight, I would want more proof.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that, like, if actually I'm going to go back on what I just said. If I was a lender, I would actually more likely lend to those who could make a shitload of money to begin with in the first 6 months because they're proving themselves, because I believe that sales and marketing skills that you need for business and whatnot, you can use that anyway. So I believe that those people are way more hireable and can produce income way better than 9 to 5ers, no offense. So for those working the 9 to 5. But yeah.
But lenders like predictability, don't they? Lenders like predictability. They want to. Lenders like predictability, so they want to know that they're not taking this big risk. They know that there's going to be this money, this cash flow coming in to lend against.
Yeah, but you know what? A lot of business owners would turn around. A lot of, like, in the coaching world would turn around and say, well, you know, you've got more skills as a business owner than a 9 to 5, which I do believe in. But yes, from the context of of banks, yes, business owners typically are a lot more high risk because the numbers speak for itself. But this day and age, so quite a few, up until recent times, for a business owner, you needed 2 financial years. So financial years being from July 1st to 30th of June. July 1st to 30th of June. You need 2 years in a row. You needed to prove yourself that you had profitability in the business. So if we've got to look at a business, if you're new to business or you don't know your business numbers, you need to know those business numbers, which is what we were just talking about before this call, Marshy, is that a lot of business owners don't know. You need to know your top line gross revenue. Mm-hmm. But the most important number that you need to know and that the banks care about is what is your actual profit that you made in that year. Now, if we narrow it down to the different jargon words here, there's 3 different ways that banks will lend you money on. So the cool thing is, so let's talk about employees for a moment. So with employees, yes, if you were to get a full-time job, we can use your income from day one of you starting that job. In fact, you cannot even start the job and you just have a contract, a letter of offer to start a new job. As long as it's full-time, we can use it from day one. How fucking amazing is that? For part-timers, usually it's 3 months into the role. Sometimes from day one also. Casuals, it's like 6 months. With business owners, you used to need 2 years worth of financials. Now you only need 1. So there's a shitload of investors now who are like, you know what? To my point, what I was just saying before, business owners, if you can prove yourself that you've done really well, profit in the first 12 months, that's good enough for us now. 12 months instead of 24 months. Great. So it's just gotten a little bit easier. Now, back to what I was about to say, there's 3 ways that you can get paid as a business owner. Whereas an employee, there's only 1 way. There's only 1 way that you can get employed, 1 form of income, right? Whereas a business owner, there's 3. The first one is a wage that you pay yourself. So if you're a company owner, you can pay yourself a wage. We can use that for your borrowing capacity. The second thing that we can also use is your profit inside the company. So you could say, for example, pay yourself a wage of 80 grand, plus you might also have profit inside the company of, say, 20,000. So that's 100 grand, as we can combine that together, and we can use that as $100,000 for your wage for the year or income. And then on top of it, there's a third way, which is dividends from a trust as well. So we can actually combine all 3 of those income streams or ways that you pay yourself on paper from an accounting perspective. We can use all of those collectively to help with your borrowing capacity, which is great.
Okay.
I'll do that as an employee.
Yeah, gotcha. So if you're a company and you're paying yourself a wage, then you can use that. And I guess at the end of the day, it's the profitability is the thing that the lenders are going to care about the most. Like if you're not profitable, then you're probably not going to they're not going to lend you money, are they?
No.
Unless you've got a decent wage.
Yes. So this is the other downside to business owners, right? Because business owners, a lot of people go into business because they're like, fuck this tax system, I don't want to pay taxes. And it's so easy to write off your taxes as a business owner, right? To the point where you can write off all of your money inside your business and then on paper it looks like you've made nothing. Mm-hmm. I literally have people come to me daily, earn $1 million, $3 million per year, daily, and on paper they've earned nothing. They've written the whole thing off. It's very easy to do that once you really understand the tax code in Australia. And as a business owner, when I became a business owner, I was like, oh my God, now I really get how the elite live. Now I really understand how you can pay nothing in taxes. Now, the downside to that is that if you did that, it is going to hinder any wealth that you want to build on the outside of it. And I'm very, very passionate about business owners building wealth, because the amount of business is active, full stop. And the amount of people that come to me in business and have made $10 million every fucking year, and they're like, I've got nothing to show for it. I'm drained. I'm burnt out in my business, and but I have no forms of passive income. I'm like, for fuck's sake, because you just blew it all, right? Because you were too worried about reducing your taxes because you were like, fuck the tax man. But all you've done is you've now stopped yourself from getting a hold of raising money, aka lending money from the bank. And the biggest upside of property investing is being able to have somebody else's money, aka the bank's money, to be able to compound for you. Because I would rather, any day of the week, I would rather pay the government $100,000 in taxes if it meant that I could borrow $600,000 of somebody else's money and then have that $600,000 compound for me. Because my team's average returns is 37% growth, capital growth on $600,000. I would rather take that option any day. And then later on, believe it or not, later on down the track, once you have properties up your sleeve and you're a business owner, then you can stop paying taxes legally for the rest of your life and you've built passive income. So for me, I'm literally the advocate of this. Fun fact for you, literally the last 2 years, I have just learned how to pay zero in taxes legally and still have borrowing capacity. How fucking cool is that?
And that's from the combination of business and property.
Yes, it needed to be a combination. And also for context, I have been in the property investing game for at least 8 or 9 years now, right? So it's taken time to get there. So it's not an overnight thing. But yes, I have, and it's very hard for me to prove this unless I was just to go out there and share my numbers directly, of which I do not want to do because I have obviously a level of privacy for myself. But there are ways that you can absolutely, which is now what I teach my clients, is how do we have the balance of paying zero in taxes legally and also having borrowing capacity is possible.
Yeah, and that's obviously only an option for business owners, not employees.
Yes. Actually, technically, even for employees, you could do it. I'll tell you how. It is very, very challenging. So the way that I would do it if I was an employee is I'd go to my business owner and I'd then essentially become a contractor on paper. That's how I would do it, formally on paper.
So switch from paid employment to more going under an ABN, doing the same thing, but as a contractor.
Correct, as a contractor, yep. And just sign on 12-month contracts, right? So you go to an employer and just say, rather than you pay me be as an employee on paper, I just want me to be a contractor on paper. That's
actually a real gangster move for people to make, like taking the step, that one step from employment's kind of like level one, but then like contracting to the same place, just because of the tax advantages that you get of not having to pay tax first as an employee. It's such a big difference there. Literally doing the same thing, but you're paying tax last now because you're doing it underneath your own ABN or your own name.
Yeah, there you go. Did you just have a light bulb moment?
No, I didn't. But that's literally what my wife Casey. That's what she's just doing a few hours a week because she's on maternity leave looking after Clifford. But she's going back to a former employee, but as a contractor now, so underneath her own ABN. Right. So that's literally what she's done. Just a little part-time.
I think it's one of the smartest things to do. If you're someone who's earning a wage of $120,000 or more like closer to $150,000, that's exactly what I would be doing. I think if I was an employee and I know what I know now, I would only ever be a contractor moving forward. So let's just say I still need someone to give me a job. I would just have, rather than be a full-time employee, I would be a contractor moving forward. You can earn more, you can reduce your taxes, you can control your money a lot more. And most of the time as a contractor, you earn more just naturally because it's not locked in as such as an employee.
100%. You earn weight. you earn way more. Like you probably triple your income, just you triple your hourly rate just from making the switch from an employee to a contract. Obviously, as a contractor, you don't get all those like super and stuff paid for you, and you've got to make sure you put money away for tax. But if you're someone who's willing to take responsibility and you want to get ahead, such a good move to make.
Such a good move. Yep, I talk to a lot of my employees that do that. A lot of my clients that do that. And also, you might be surprised. Just ask your employer. You never know until you're asked. They might be really open to it. For me, I have a goal to build a $20 million business with 0 staff. I don't want a single employee working for me. I'll take contractors, and that's all I want. Because I like the flexibility, and I don't like being locked in. And it's easier for me as an employee that as well. So you might be surprised. It could benefit everyone.
Well, there we go. We opened up a whole new thread there, Liv, which has probably got people thinking, which I love. Yeah. Just to finish on. Because, okay, so lending is hard for business owners. I feel like we've covered that pretty well. And actually just one little other thread from that I was thinking about was, I feel like so often in business, like, accountants, they'll tell you, buy all this stuff so that you can reduce your tax and pay no tax. But it's just like, I feel like when you're only making decisions just solely for the tax purposes, I feel like it's a stupid thing to do as a business owner, especially if you want to build wealth outside of business.
Yeah. If you are the 1% of people, and I'm not talking to the 1%, but just for context, if you are the 1% type of person who can scale business and have multiple companies and multiple income streams from multiple companies, you probably don't need real estate at all, right? But that's probably 1% of people know how to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm talking to the average Australian right now. I'm talking to the average Aussie who is a sole trader, owns a business, and is quite active in it. You want to really start thinking about something passive that you're going to build on the outside of it, and then you've got to think about the compounding impact. And to your point about accountants are not wealth builders. Accountants are compliance checkers for the ATO. They care about, number one, to make sure that you're compliant to the ATO. And then number two, they care about you reducing your taxes. And there might be the 1 or 10% of accountants out there who would disagree with me. They're like, yeah, Olivia, I am for you. And I'm like, okay, but you're rare. Most accountants they're bred by the government and they just want to follow the process and they just want to, be a good little compliant person. Great. You ain't going to build wealth with that. So you need to also remind as somebody who's building your wealth, you need to go to your brokers, your accountants, your coaches, your mentors, whoever, and you need to remind all of them of what your goals are. To say, hey, my end goal, my vision is to actually build a property portfolio. So to do that, Mr. Accountant, I don't just want to, have zero profit for the year. I need to make sure I have borrowing capacity. And then you go to your broker, you say, hey, broker, to one of the questions I was explaining to you before, one of the things we'll talk about at the start. Go to your broker and say, hey, broker, how much do I need to earn on paper? Great. Thanks, Mr. Broker. I need to earn 200 grand for the year. Okay. Then you go back to your accountant and say, accountant, just to let you know, I'm building a property portfolio. A broker says I need to earn 200,000. Let's just keep this in mind when we're doing my taxes, just to make sure that we can divide that over each quarter to make sure I'm reaching that goal by the end of the year, please. How should we best divvy this up, Mr. Accountant? Now, do I divvy this up in wage or do I divvy this up as a profit? I'll give you an example right now. The easiest way is profit. It's the best way. It's the best balance where we can use that for borrowing capacity, but we can also, not financial advice, I'm not an accountant, go and speak to your accountant, but it's also the way to reduce your taxes a lot as well. So it's the profit bucket out of those 3 ways of explaining, dividends through trust, profit, and wage. The best way is the profit, because you can get basically the best of both worlds, minimizing your tax as much as possible, as well as your wage as well. That's if you're someone who's making over at least 150 grand a year in business.
Okay. So yeah, a few of the key points there for me, it's like making sure you've got the right people on your team, the right professionals on your team, and then making sure that they all know what your goals or your visions are and that they're working together. Because I guess because some can just be too narrow focused on what their objective is, whether that's reducing tax, but making sure you've got a great team and they know your vision and they're almost working together.
Yep. Amen.
Okay. So Liv, 10 property myths have been busted. I'm just going to recap these quickly. So number 1 was properties cost over 700K, busted. Number 2, it's hard to buy interstate, busted. Number 3, brokers said I can't borrow money, we busted that. Number 4, properties end up being vacant, busted. 5, tenants trash properties, busted. 6, you need money in your bank account, busted. 7, the process is hard and confusing. Yes, it is, but we still busted that when you get the right help like yourself. 8, I don't know who to trust. Well, you know, live now, so busted. 9, need to earn a shit ton of money, busted. And then 10, lending is hard for business owners, busted. There we go. You have just been busting myths. And we've just crossed the 2-hour mark as well, Liv. There we go. We've been going for a while.
Oh my God, we talk so much, dude. I do. I talk a lot.
And there was a lot of tangents we could have gone down, but we didn't. They're there for future conversations. But hey, Liv, like I've really enjoyed unpacking these 10 property myths with you. And if people were loving this conversation as well, where is the best social media platforms to connect with? Even though I know you're offered a little bit these days, but where should they follow you?
So either one, just look up Olivia Ward property on your favorite social media platform, or I'm sure that I can provide you the link to click in the to provide in this video, so that way you can just book in a free 15-minute call with me if you like.
Brilliant. Love that, Liv. And now the other thing as well, Liv, is earlier this year we recorded about a 2.5-hour live property investing masterclass together where you came on as the guest. This was, going back a while, and it was absolute fire. Like the people who were on that call live, they were just like fire emoji times 10. It was a dynamite session. So what I wanted to do today, Liv, is for the people listening to this, if you really love what Liv is about and you want to actually go down this rabbit hole even further, I'll actually share the recording of that live masterclass we did together earlier this year. So if this is you're listening to this on this, wherever you're watching this on Spotify, wherever else, comment down below and say masterclass, and I will directly send that to you because there's an absolute goldmine of value in there, which we haven't unpacked here. So little bonus for the people who have listened to the end.
Yay. Well done. I loved doing that masterclass. That was fun.
It was good fun. It was good fun. 2.5 hours of action. So that's just a little bonus for the people that are really keen and eager to learn some more. But Livo, appreciate you coming onto the podcast once again. Appreciate you being the first person to come back on for the second time, and I'm sure this won't be the final time either. So thank you for being here, and I just wish you all the best for what's to come on your journey.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
Any final words?
No final words from me, other than invest your heart out, build passive income, and exit the matrix.
I love that, Liv. Well, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, Liv. And guys, also make sure you click the follow button, leave a 5-star review and a comment as well if you've enjoyed this episode.